Hello, it's Brian McCarthy here from Bold&Break. I have a very exciting announcement today. We have a tutorial being shown to us by Kevin O'Shea. He is a close friend of mine and I've worked with him for a good few years now. We've known each other since college. He is a master at Sim 4D. He specialises in motion graphics, but kind of more in the CG area of motion graphics. He's going to be showing you kind of everything from xpresso to lighting and texturing in Octane, and he's going to really go into depth. It's a two-part series. It's Christmas themed, and unfortunately, due to scheduling and circumstances, we didn't get this tutorial out as quickly as we wanted to. We want to get out before Christmas. A bit of post-festive cheer if you're feeling down. This is a pretty cool one. So I'll jump to Kevin now, and I hope you enjoy.
Alright lads, Kev O'Shea here from Bold&Break. A very Merry Christmas to everyone. Let's make something festive. So essentially what I did to make that video was to create this present with a bunch of procedural controls and just animate the parameters. As you can see here. Let's take a look behind the hood. So don't worry, this is not as bad as it initially looks. We're going to make this from scratch. Alright, let's give it a go. So what we're going to do first is we're going to create a rectangle. We're going to set that to XZ, and we're going to make the width and the height 80. And we're going to drop that in an extrude, and we're going to change this to 0 and 80 on the Y. So the first thing we do is we create our present, and this is going to hold all our objects together. We're going to add some user data. I'm going to add a group. I'm going to call this present controls. I'm going to take this data and drop it in, and we're going to set this to be the height. Not all caps. Height. Okay, make it a float slider, real. Set the max to be 400. Slider max to be 4000, and I think 80 is a nice number to start with. So we're going to copy this and we're going to paste it twice, and we'll set this to be the width and this to be the depth. Cool. Okay, and we're going to add one more, and this is going to be the fillet. And we'll also make this a float slider, real. Set this max to be 20, 200, and I think 5. Yeah, that's a good number. Cool. Okay, so we're going to attach these parameters to our geometry with xpresso. Don't want to go full screen. Reduce this a bit. Alright, so we'll drag the present in, and we'll search for present controls. And go height, width, fill it, and you can read. Actually, let's swap that around. Okay, so we're going to drag in our extrude, which obviously controls the height. I'm going to go object properties, movement Y, and attach this to the height, and we take our rectangle, we drag this in and input the width and the height. Okay, and through no surprise, width to width and depth to height. Okay, so let's give that a test run. Amazing. Cool. Set this back to 80, 80, 80. Not 400, 80, not 800. Alright, so, and the fillet is yet to be added. So, basically what we do to add the fillet, so in extrude, that is contained in the caps and size, and if we just drag this into extrude and set the fillet here, we can see that we can now control this fillet. And the way we would do that in the rectangle is we turn on rounding, and we go into the settings, object properties, radius, and we connect it to that. So basically the fillet is universal throughout the box. Alright, pretty straightforward. That's easy. We got basically most of our present here. So what we're going to do is rename this present shape and present height. Cool. And that's step one. Pretty easy. Alright, step two is we're going to create some ribbons. And basically the way we do that is another rectangle. And let's set this to 80 and 80 again so we can see it. And let's call this ribbon with path. Okay, we'll drop that into a sweep, and then we just need a shape for our sweep. We'll create another rectangle, and the width can be 1 and the height can be 20. Okay, so let's call this ribbon thickness, because that's what it is. And then ribbon width. Okay, we'll duplicate this, call it depth, depth, and we'll just change the alignment of this to ZY. Perfect. Okay, let's take this ribbon, let's create another null to contain that ribbon, just to keep everything nice and neat, and we'll drop them into this. Alright, let's add some user data for the ribbon. Okay, controls, user data, manage user data. So we'll add another data node, and we'll call this ribbon controls, and this is just going to be a separator to organize what we've got. We'll add another, and we'll set this to be ribbon thickness. This can be another slider, real, and ribbons generally aren't that thick, so we'll just set that to 20, max 200 in case you want to go nuts with it, and the default value can be 1. Okay, we'll copy this and we'll paste it, and we'll call this ribbon width. And this time, let's make this, actually let's leave this as is, but we'll set the default value of 5. Okay, we'll click OK, and we'll go in here, present controls, ribbon thickness, and ribbon width. Cool. Alright then, let's drag this in here, ribbon thickness, and both of these settings are going to control this. We're going to have multiple instances of this throughout the procedural setup, so what we're going to do to make life easier is new node, xpresso, iterator, object list. This is going to be handy. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag right now both instances of thickness in here, and on object we link up instance to object, and then everything inside this object list is automatically going to line up with ribbon thickness. So the coordinates we need are height and width. Let me drag the object down here. So the thickness we will actually link to the width, and the width we will link to the height, if it manages to work. Okay, and we can give that a test, and that works fine. That was perfectly cool. Let's set that up to 20. Alright, now what we need to do is align the ribbon to the box. And the way we do that is to, first off, we'll drag in this path here. And we'll take the height and the width. And these are going to be controlled by these parameters as well. So height and width. So let's give this a test. Width. And you can see here it's following along the box. No problem. Okay, we'll set that back to 80. Okay, so obviously this is in the wrong position. So what we're going to do is set the coordinates, position Y, and what we want the position Y to be is half of the height, which is going to align it to the box. So we go new node, xpresso, calculate, math. And the math is going to be divide by 2. Okay, so we'll plug the height in here, and we'll output that to the position. And you can see here it has jumped to the proper place. Okay, perfect. We're also going to match the radius to our initial present, and to do that we need to enable rounding again. Okay, so we'll link the fillet to the radius, and you can kind of see here that it's curving as well, just like our box. But of course, with the extrude, the fillet takes place on top of it rather than contained within it. So to accommodate that, what we need to do is adjust the position. Not the position. What we need to do is adjust the height. And the way we do that, one is create a new node, xpresso, calculate math, and we want to add on the fillet, but the fillet is at the top and bottom as well. So basically we need a math node and we need a multiply node. So we'll take the fillet, plug it into multiply. We need to multiply it by 2, plug that into the add, and we also plug in the height, and then we accommodate that here. Just line this up nice and neat-ish, as neat as you can make it with this horrible setup. And yeah, there we go. It's aligning nicely. It'll follow that perfectly. And then we just duplicate this. I'm going to grab it right here and plug this in here. Boom. Cool. Alright, we got a firmly attached ribbon. Yep, that's not going anywhere. Perfect. We'll go back to 80, 80, 80, and fillet of 2 is fine. Okay, so the next step that we want to do is we want to be able to move these ribbons around So let's take, for instance, this. Not you. And we want to be able to slide it back and forth, but we want it to be constrained by the proportions of the box. So this is proportional movement, and the way we're going to do that, well, let's start with the ribbon width path. Okay, and we're going to set its coordinates, its position, and its position Z, because that is the position that we move it on. If you'll check here, Z. And we need something to plug into that. So let's add some user data. We go user data, manage user data, and we're going to add some data. Okay, so we're going to go with ribbon width position, and we'll set this to be a float slider. We'll leave it at percentage, and we'll set the default value to 50%. That's good. I'm going to copy this and we'll paste it again, and we'll set this to the not the happy depth. Cool. And we'll leave those settings the same. I'm going to click OK. So now we have these parameters to control. I'll press Control, depth position, and width position. Perfect. Okay, so we want this ribbon to be able to move side to side. So we need this width of the box to be 100% minus the fillets. So let's create a math node. Go xpresso, calculate. See if this comes up. Math. Perfect. Math. And we're going to set it to be multiply. So we need to multiply the fillet by 2. And then we need a subtract node. So I've just duplicated the math node, switch from multiply to subtract. And we're going to subtract this amount from the depth. And we're using the depth because we're working on the z-axis. Okay, so we'll duplicate this again. And this is the main amount, and we are subtracting the ribbon width. And if you want to check this, your best friend is going to be, if it comes up, the result node. So let's check it. Looks pretty perfect to me. Okay. Create a new node, xpresso, calculate, math. And to account for the fact that there's like a negative and positive z, we're going to multiply. And the reason we use multiply is because you can multiply by negative numbers, and that will give you a negative result. So let's say this is 0.5. And we plug this into here. And the great thing about the range mapper is we can set it to percent, which is the ribbon, but we can output the lower and upper ranges. So I plug this into the output lower, and we duplicate this, and we set this to be negative 0.5, and we plug this into output upper, and we plug it into the position Z. Alright, let's give that a test. Oh, and what we also need to do is plug this into the input. And look at that. That will only go as far as the present can go. And that is absolutely proportional. That is perfect. Okay, we'll neaten this up a bit. Get rid of that. Make it nice and neat. Okay, and what we're going to do is duplicate this. Carry it up here. And instead of the width, we're going to make it the depth. And let's just check these settings. We know the fillet is here. The width goes in here. The width goes in here. And the depth goes in here. Okay, let's take this for a test run. We know that works. That works. Oh, and we screwed up. But that's cool because we know it's the X position we need to be on. Let me delete this port. And that's no problem. We just need to put that back to 0. Okay. So we got the thickness, got the position here, and the position here. And it's going no further. And that's perfect. That's absolutely awesome. And that's step 2 complete. Alright, next step, let's make a bow for our present. And what we want to do is create a circle. And we're going to drop this down to 20, and we're going to change the plane to ZY. And let's hide this present so we can see what we're doing. And we're going to drop a taper underneath it. And let's play with this a bit. So we'll bring this down to 100. Turn the curvature down to 0. And let's rotate this 90 degrees. So we got a nice loop. And let's extend it a little bit by adjusting the Z scale to 1.5. We got ourselves a nice loop. Okay, we're going to drop this in a sweep NURBS. We're going to take the thickness, we're going to drop it in, not the whole thing, just this. And there we have it. Ribbon thickness, sweep. Let's call this loop sweep. And we'll call this loop path. And just for good measure, we'll call this loop taper. Label everything. Good practice, good practice. Okay, let's drop this inside of a cloner. We'll set the cloner to be radial. Bring the radius down to 0. And turn this up to 6. Let's take a look at what's going on here. Okay, we'll turn the taper around to 90. Perfect. Okay, so let's adjust these settings with xpresso. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the loop path, and this is going to drive everything. So we'll set the object properties, if it comes up, radius. Okay, and let's take the coordinates position Z. Okay, and we want a math node, calculate math, and a multiply. We're going to multiply that by 1.5 because that's the position that we want it to be. And suddenly it springs out. Cool. Okay, put this up here, and if we adjust the radius, you can see here the taper isn't following it. So let's amend that, and we know we want the taper to be 2 times the radius. So let's multiply that by 2. We'll plug that in here eventually. Take the taper, object properties, size Y, and we'll plug that in. Let's give that a test again. That's perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. Let's call this lower loops, and we're going to duplicate this, and we're going to call it upper loops because we want to make top loops. Let's move this up by 10. Let's transform these so they lie flat. So we'll take the lower loops, we'll go transform, bring it up by 15, and let's angle them slightly, 20 degrees. Let's do the same with the upper loops, but let's bring them up 45. Okay, it's not too bad, but we do want the upper loops to be smaller than the lower loops, so we can drive that procedurally. So we're going to take the upper loop path, put it out here, and we're going to control their radius, and we want their radius to be smaller but consistent with the upper radius. So we're going to use a range mapper. The output can be 1, be 0.8. So let's swap that in here, put that in there, and we have consistently smaller top loops. And let's do the same thing here. Let's plug them in, and we know loop path, loop taper. Okay, let's have a play around with it. Perfect. We've got ourselves a functioning bow. Likewise, let's create a null, keep everything together under the present, and let's add some user data, manage user data. So let's add more data and put it down here. We'll make this a separator to keep everything organized, and let's call this. Now if we think about what kind of settings that we want, we're going to want to control the amount of loops on the bottom and top, and we're going to want to be able to control the radius of these loops as well. So let's do that. We'll call this radius. Let's make that a float slider, real. Let's set the max to be 50, slider max 500, and we'll set you to be 20. Probably help if we spelled it right. Okay. And we're going to add more, and we're actually going to make this an integer, and this is going to directly set how many loops that we have. So let's make this 40. We're also going to set this to 400, and let's have a maximum of 12, and let's set this as lower loops. Copy this, paste it, call it upper loop, integer, and we'll set this maximum to be 6. Okay. And let's also set whether or not we actually want this enabled. So let's call this bow on / off. And we're going to make this a boolean. And we're going to set the default value to be automatically on. Let's click OK. Alright, let's hook this up. So present controls. Start with that. Controls, loop radius, lower loops, and upper loops. Okay, so then the radius is controlled via this loop. So let's set that. Object properties, radius, or loop radius. And we'll directly hook that up. Okay, the count controlled here, and that will set the amount of lower loops. I'll duplicate this, drag in the upper loops, and again, set it here. There should be no problem. Let's see if we can demo this. And just like that, we have loops. And they procedurally grow and shrink. Perfect. Okay. In terms of switching it on and off, the easiest way to do that is actually just to switch off these themselves. Go basic, enable. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to basic properties, enabled. We duplicate this, and we're going to drag in this. Alright, let's give that a test. Right. Okay, let's turn this visibility off so we're not distracted by it. Terrific, and that's our bow. Okay, now what we need to do is set the position. So, let's take a look at our ribbon bow. We're going to need to set the null down to where we want it. That's a good spot. We want it to align the bottom of these loops. Okay, switch that off, and we'll drag this in. And basically we're going to want to control each individual coordinate with a separate setting. So we know we want the Z to match this ribbon. We know we want the X to match this ribbon. And we want the height plus the fillet. xpresso calculate math. So we go height plus the fillet, and we're going to put this on the position Z. And just like that, it jumps right to it. Okay, let's bring this down. Well, there you have it. That's one fully procedural present. Okay, perfect. So enjoy that, and yeah, join me for part 2 where we talk about coloring this. Alright, thanks very much guys, and I'll see you in the next part.